Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The United Nations says more than 4.5 million people have fled Ukraine since Russia's invasion began 46 days ago on February 24th. On Saturday, residents of government-controlled parts of eastern Ukraine were urged to evacuate immediately as Russia began a major offensive in the Donbas region. Satellite images show Russia has amassed an 8-mile convoy of military vehicles inside Russia east of the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv. Over the weekend, Russian President Vladimir Putin tapped Alexander Dvornikov to be Russia's new battlefield leader in Ukraine. The general most recently oversaw Russian troops in Syria, where he was accused of targeting civilians and medical facilities. In the Ukrainian city of Kramatorsk, the death toll has risen to 57 following a missile attack Friday on a crowded train station packed with civilians trying to flee the area. There were over 100 wounded. Ukraine and Russia have accused each other of carrying out the strike. On Saturday, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson made a surprise trip to Kyiv, where he met with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
And together with our partners, we are going to ratchet up the economic pressure, and we will continue to intensify week by week the sanctions on Russia. Not just freezing assets in banks and sanctioning oligarchs, but moving away from use of Russian hydrocarbons. And we will give you the support that you need, the economic support, but also, of course, the defensive military support, in which I'm proud to say that the UK helped to lead the way.
We'll go to London after headlines to speak with Tariq Ali. As the US, UK and allies continue to pour arms into Ukraine, Pope Francis has called for an Easter truce.
Si ripongano le armi. Si inizi una tregua pasquale.
Put the weapon down. Let an Easter truce start, but not to rearm and resume combat, but a truce to reach peace through real negotiations, willing even to make some sacrifices for the good of the people. Which victory will be the one that plants a flag on a pile of rubble?
In news from Russia, the Ministry of Justice has ordered Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and 13 other international organizations to close their offices, claiming they're violating Russian law. Global food prices have hit an all-time high. This, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. The FAO's food price index jumped 13% in March. Prices are expected to keep rising, in part due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The two countries account for about 12% of the world's calories. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has been ousted from power after losing a no-confidence vote in Parliament. Hundreds of thousands of Khan's supporters marched Sunday to protest. In a tweet, Khan described his removal as a form of, quote, US-backed regime change. Pakistani lawmakers are now deciding who will replace Khan as Prime Minister. The frontrunner is Shehbaz Sharif, the brother of former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. Khan and other members of his PTI party have threatened to resign en masse from Parliament. We'll have more on Pakistan after headlines. We'll go to Islamabad and London. French President Emmanuel Macron and far-right candidate Marine Le Pen are headed to an election runoff April 24th. In the first round of voting, Macron won over 27% of the vote. Le Pen placed second with about 23%. Macron urged French voters to reject Le Pen's xenophobic policies.
Je veux une France qui s'inscrit dans une Europe forte.
I want a France which inscribes itself in a strong Europe, which continues to form alliance with great democracies to defend itself. Not a France that exited from Europe would have for its only allies the international populist and xenophobes. That's not us.
The leftist candidate, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, placed third with about 22% of the vote. He urged his supporters to not give a single vote to Marine Le Pen in the runoff. We'll have more on the French elections later in the broadcast. We'll go to Paris. President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris hosted Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson at the White House Friday, one day after she was confirmed by the Senate to become the first black woman to serve on the Supreme Court. Judge Jackson spoke at the event on the South Lawn.
It has taken 232 years and 115 prior appointments for a black woman to be selected to serve on the Supreme Court of the United States. But we've made it.
A leader of the far-right Proud Boys organization pleaded guilty Friday to criminal conspiracy charges over his role leading the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. Charles Donahoe is the first Proud Boys leader to admit to plotting an attack on Congress in order to halt certification of Joe Biden's election victory. As part of a plea deal with federal investigators, Donahoe will testify against other defendants. Meanwhile, CNN reports Donald Trump Jr. texted then White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows shortly after the presidential election in November 2020 with ideas about how to overturn the results in states won by Joe Biden. Trump Jr. wrote, quote, "Republicans control Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, North Carolina, etc. We get Trump electors," unquote. If that plan failed, Trump Jr. wrote, "Congress should intervene during its count of the Electoral College votes, quote, we either have a vote we control and we win, or it gets kicked to Congress January 6, 2021, Donald Trump Jr. texted. In other news about the Trump family, the New York Times reports a fund led by the Saudi Crown Prince has invested $2 billion in Jared Kushner's new private equity firm. While serving in his father-in-law's administration, Kushner helped push forward a $110 billion weapons sale to Saudi Arabia. Public Citizen described the relationship between Kushner and the Saudis as, quote, extremely troubling. The Saudi fund also invested $1 billion in a fund run by President Trump's Treasury Secretary, Steven Mnuchin. In Texas, a county prosecutor has dropped charges against a 26-year-old woman who was arrested for murder Thursday after being accused of causing the, quote, death of an individual through a self-induced abortion, unquote. Lizelle Herrera was detained on a $500,000 bond. Her arrest and detention sparked mass outrage. She was released Saturday, hours after La Frontera Fund held a protest outside the Starr County Jail. Later in the program, we'll speak with Rocky Gonzalez, the founder of La Frontera Fund. Alabama Republican Governor Kay Ivey has signed a pair of bills targeting trans people and those who assist them. One bill outlaws gender-affirming medicine for transgender youth and makes it a felony to provide such care, while a second bill requires students to use bathrooms and locker rooms based on sex assigned at birth rather than their gender identity. An amendment to the second bill, modeled after Florida's Don't Say Gay law, bars classroom discussions of gender identity and sexual orientation for children through the 5th grade. Lawmakers in at least 19 states have recently proposed bills limiting or criminalizing health care services for trans youth. In China, authorities say they will start easing a 2-week lockdown in Shanghai, where over 25 million residents have been confined to their homes due to rising COVID infections. Anger's mounting over food and medicine shortages in parts of the city. Despite the lockdown, China recorded 26,000 new infections in Shanghai Sunday. Here in the United States, New York City Mayor Eric Adams has tested positive for the coronavirus. Last week, he attended the Gridiron Club dinner in Washington, D.C. At least 67 attendees of the dinner have now tested positive, including Attorney General Merrick Garland, Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack, and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. On Sunday, top White House advisor Dr. Anthony Fauci said it's now up to individuals to assess their own COVID risk. He spoke on ABC's This Week.
This is not going to be eradicated, and it's not going to be eliminated. And what's going to happen is that we're going to see that each individual is going to have to make their calculation of the amount of risk that they want to take in going to indoor dinners and going to functions.
In labor news, Amazon is seeking to overturn the recent vote to unionize by workers at an Amazon warehouse in Staten Island, New York. Amazon, which ran a multi-million-dollar union-busting campaign, is now accusing union organizers of trying to intimidate workers. In other labor news, workers have voted to unionize at 6 more Starbucks stores, bringing the total to 16 in recent months. In West Virginia, more than a dozen climate activists were arrested Saturday as they nonviolently blockaded a coal-fired power plant that earned Democratic Senator Joe Manchin $500,000 last year. The protests targeted the Granttown Coal Waste Power Plant, which receives deliveries from Enersystems, a company run by Senator Manchin's son. Activists wanted to highlight the environmental harm caused by the Manchin family business and are calling on the senator to end his opposition to climate action in the Build Back Better Act. Federal prosecutors have been dealt a stunning defeat in the trial of 4 men who are accused of plotting to kidnap and kill Michigan Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer. A jury acquitted 2 men on all charges and deadlocked on the verdicts against 2 others. Defense attorneys argued the plot was manufactured by the FBI and a team of at least 12 informants who helped plan and encourage others to take part. A warning to our viewers and listeners, the following includes images of police violence. 2 Buffalo police officers have been cleared of wrongdoing for knocking over a 75-year-old racial justice protester in June 2020. Martin Gugino, a longtime peace activist, suffered a brain injury, a fractured skull, and spent a month in the hospital after being shoved to the ground by police. A video of the incident quickly went viral. The officers are expected to be reinstated today following the arbitrator's ruling. And Mexico's President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has overwhelmingly won a referendum on whether he should complete his 6-year term. AMLO called for the referendum himself to fulfill a campaign promise to give voters a chance to remove him from office after 3 years. Early results show about 90% of voters supported him, but turnout was about 18%, with many critics of AMLO boycotting the referendum. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.